This was the response given by the people when the police special task force discovered more than 150 kilograms of narcotic substances in Ravatawata yesterday. Does this not mean that the people of this country are appreciative and are rallying behind the president's fight against the drugs in the country?
Hello there, very good Tuesday evening to all of us. This is Primetime News. We're coming to you live and direct this evening from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo. Bringing you the news tonight, I'm Joel Outscorn.
And I'm Michaela Fernando. Before we head into more news in detail, here's a look at headlines.
The second reading of the 2019 budget passed in Parliament. SLFP remains from casting the vote, while TNA voted in favour. Sri Lanka obtains over $2 billion at an interest rate of 7%, while other countries in the region obtain loans with interest rates less than 4%. Co-warrantor writ petition filed by Ranil Wickremesinghe and 121 MPs against Mahinda Rajapaksa withdrawn by petitioners.
The Budget 2019 with News First.
Well, starting off with our top story this evening. Now, the second reading of the 2019 budget was passed in Parliament this evening. 119 votes were cast in favour of the budget, while 76 were cast against it. 30 parliamentarians abstained from voting. SLFP MP Arumugam Thondaman cast his vote in favour of the budget. When the voting took place in Parliament today, MPs Dayasiri Jayasekara, Mahinda Amarveera, Duminda Dissanayaka, Dr. Sarath Amunugama and Venerable Athuruliya Ratnathera were not present. 13 parliamentarians of the Tamil National Alliance cast their vote in favour of the second reading of the 2019 budget.
The budget was presented to Parliament by the Minister of Finance Mangala Samaraveera on the 5th of this month. The government expenditure according to the 2019 budget stands at 4,550 billion rupees. The government revenue is estimated at 2,400 billion rupees. The committee stage debate on the third reading of the budget will commence tomorrow and will go on till the 5th of April. The vote on the 2019 budget will be held on the 5th of April.
Who can we speak to? What do we say? Since the President's budget overhead matter is coming up tomorrow, they must have thought if they vote against it, the others will vote against the overhead tomorrow. I think that is why they abstained. President Maithripala Sirisena is the chairman of the SLFP. The parliamentarians took a decision along with him. That is a good decision and an important one. If you want to topple governments, if you want to defeat the budget and if you want to create new governments, learn from us. As we have voted against this budget, we will also stand with the people. That is what we expressed by casting our votes against this. Our opposition said they will defeat the budget. They call this a government that is politically unstable. While the development activities are taking place, we have depicted today as to where the power lies. We have shown our strength today. Yes, it was crucial. I think they received certain powers and certain gifts. Therefore, some had to vote for that side. I cannot say they received money. I can only speak of the benefits. When the voting is done democratically, we always win. I have an important question for the flower bud. Where is the budget that you said you would defeat? Where are the forecasts that you did before the country? This is the same fate that the Pohottuwa will have to face at the presidential election as well.
Several comments were made in Parliament today regarding the recently issued international sovereign bonds. The comments revealed that the ISBs were issued at higher interest rates when compared with several other countries.
It is the officials of the central bank who can help Sri Lanka get back on track. Recently, Sri Lanka received $3 billion. We are happy that our country received this. However, we must note that our country has been misguided in such situations. Bonds with a maturity period of 10 years have been issued at an interest rate of 7.85%. During the same period, Malaysia had issued bonds at 3.87%, Thailand at 2.51%, Vietnam at 4.87%, Greece at 3.84% and Botswana at 5.27%. Sri Lanka was able to issue the same quantity of bond interest rate 5 years ago.
As a cabinet minister, will you submit information regarding the central bank's decision to issue such a large quantity of treasury bonds at an interest rate of 7.85%?
This is why I said the central bank has made certain decisions that goes against the development of our country. When we make such statements, they make hasty decisions. We must repay our loans along with its interest. The debt burden may include loans which were obtained by the present government. Despite the IMF's existence, policies are implemented by Sri Lankans. The international community only advises us on how to take the country forward. No, you must not speak of matters you are not aware of. The former president is aware in this regard. The sinful debts that were obtained during your government is what we are paying now.
International sovereign bonds worth $1 billion and $1.4 billion with maturity periods of 5 years and 10 years respectively were issued recently. During the past week, Vietnam had also issued ISBs at an interest rate of 4.78%, while Thailand and Greece had issued ISBs at 2.51% and 3.84% respectively. The central bank and the present government had issued a 5-year maturing ISB at an interest rate of 6.85%. The $1.4 billion ISB maturing in 10 years has been issued at an interest rate of 7.81%. What's the purpose of establishing a government? The government must forecast crises that the country may face in the future. They must prepare a plan that would solve these issues. However, due to the non-existence of such plans, the country's debt has increased, deteriorating the economy. Ultimately, it is the public that must bear the burden. It is clear that a scam similar to the infamous bond issue that took place on the 27th of February 2015 had taken place. Therefore, the government must be transparent in this regard and keep the public informed.
As a result of the former president's hunger for power that led to the 52-day political turmoil in our country, Sri Lanka was downgraded by international rating agencies. As a result, our country has to pay higher interest rates by approximately 3%. Under the present government, interest rates have normalized. However, interest rates are still higher than normal by about 1%. Because of the 52-day conspiracy, our country has approximately lost 6.4 billion rupees. We should recover those losses from those responsible.
Hello, good evening and welcome to the newsroom. And in the newsroom today with me is the senior retired banker, Mr. Rusripala Tenakon. Good evening to you, Mr. Rusripala.
Good evening, Faraz.
Now, we've heard what the Finance Minister, Mr. Mangala Samaravira, says about the higher interest rates.
Yes.
In this context, we note that in the last few days, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka issued a press release in which they said that they have raised $2.4 billion, that's 2,400 million US dollars in bonds between 5 years and 10 years. And they gave us the information in their press release that they had paid between 6.9% and 7.9% in US dollars. Now, isn't it true to say, Mr. Rusripala, that rather than, as Mr. Samaravira, the Minister of Finance, maintains, that they had to pay these high rates because of debt that they inherited from the previous regime, isn't it true that the trend for offering high interest rates by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka was actually created in February 2015, when Mr. Arjuna Mahendran, who was the governor then, decided to take up 10 times more money than what the central bank had advertised. They called for 1 billion rupees, and one company alone, Perpetual Treasuries Limited, along with the Bank of Ceylon, made bids worth or offered 15 billion rupees. Their aggregate was 15 billion rupees.
Yes.
Which is 1,500% more than the 1 billion that the central bank had advertised.
Yeah.
And therefore, when they took up, eventually, thanks to Mrs. Deepa Seniviratna, who objected and made a note, along with other officials who objected to take up the 20 billion, as the Governor Mahendran wanted, she made a note, and the central bank, at the insistence and the instructions of the Governor, Arjuna Mahendran, took just over 10 billion. Half of that went to perpetual treasuries.
Yes.
And here's the key critical thing. Because they changed the system, there was no average yield there. They took up, accepted the bids from perpetual at 12.5%. Now, I put it to you, Mr. Rusripala, that this was the trend. The trend for higher interest rates was done on the 27th of February 2015. And I put it to you, Mr. Rusripala, that that is the trend that we found ourselves in a few days ago when the central bank went to the international market to raise 2.4 billion, 2,400 million United States dollars at rates between 6.9% and 7.9%. I put it to you, isn't that the trend?
Yes. It is true that Mangala Samaraveera, the Minister of Finance, is trying to attribute some of the faults of this government to various things that he cannot justify and then substantiate. So this has been the trend. They have been repeatedly doing this over and over again. But going back to this interest issue,
yeah.
I think the adverse effect of the playing of the higher interest rates in this country commenced in no uncertain terms on the 27th of February 2015 with the infamous bond scam. How it happened
yes.
can be looked into, and this is something that we can scientifically and logically prove and establish, rather than attributing, various things that they cannot maintain.
Yes.
Now, what happened that day, Paras? The central bank called for 1 billion.
Yes.
After the closing of the offers on that day for the bond, the central bank public debts department decided to recommend accepting 2.6 billion at an average yield curve of 10.74.
That was the average of the offers for what the central bank was looking for.
They were looking at so many things, but one of the most significant things that they looked into at that time was, this was a 30-year bond. Whatever rate of interest that they agreed to offer or accept on that date would definitely continue for 30 more years. So this was one of the significant factors. So taking that into account, the central bank playing its role on behalf of the government to take money at the cheapest rate on the one hand, and also to maintain the interest levels of a long-term, long-running bond for over a period of 30 years at a manageable rate. They decided to accept the curve, average curve,
the average yield,
the long-term, long-standing curve to be at manageable levels.
Which is why they wanted to take
2.6 billion. If it was taken, we would have maintained the rate at 10.74 tax, net of tax, for the next 30 years. What happened? Due to Arjuna Mahendran's intervention, just to support his son-in-law's company, to make him earn illegitimately from that bond issue, he instructed, directed the officials of the central bank, against their wishes, against their advice, to increase the amount from 2.6 billion to 10 billion. And at that 10 billion, due to that, the curve went up to 12.5%. The average curve was 11.74.
And the principal beneficiary of that was obviously as the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the issuance of bonds was Perpetual Treasuries Limited. The bond report, so-called, popularly known as the bond report, very specifically, 2 Supreme Court judges and a retired Deputy Auditor General made their conclusion known in the report. It says that Arjuna Mahendran acted mala fide in the interest of Perpetual Treasuries Limited by giving away price-sensitive information. And this is the information with which Perpetual Treasuries Limited launched into a money-making vehicle. They made whirlwind profits based on that. And Mr. Rusiripala, I'm sorry to go on about this, but I'm not so sorry, because I'm talking with a passion for the people, because it's the people's money. The principal mistake or the principal liability was with none other than the people's monies through the Employees Provident Fund, the EPF. The same Presidential Commission looking into the bonds has actually put a figure in there, and the losses, the people's monies through the EPF was, wait for it, 8,500 million rupees, or over 8.5 billion rupees. The interest at today's current rates is around 2.5 million. If you add the penalty, it's 17 billion. It takes what the EPF could earn at 5 million rupees every day.
Yeah.
But Mr. Rusiripala, the trend was set not because of some previous administration who certainly had their own faults, but why doesn't the Minister of Finance admit that the trend was set by none other than by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, by offering high rates for no earthly purpose other than to make profits for themselves?
Now, to accommodate his son-in-law's company to make undue profits and to make him obtain 5 billion out of the 10 that was decided at a higher rate of interest, it is a continuing adverse effect to which the country is paying up to date.
Mr. Rusiripala, before we hand it back to Joel on the main news, can I just ask you this? Mr. Sumandiran said during the debate that the information in the budget was all false. Surely the done thing would have been for Mr. Sumandiran to exercise his displeasure and to prove that what he said was not mere theatrics,
yes,
but that he really believed in what he said by voting against the budget.
I thought he brought in a red herring to mislead the people that they are also going to vote against the budget. It was just a red herring like many other things that he did.
The sad part, isn't it, Mr. Rusiripala, that the people, including the mastermind behind the bond scam and costing the people and the country so much of money, and the higher rates that we are now paying on the international markets in dollars, the sad part is that some of these people are still ruling or governing this country.
Yes, indeed. That is the saddest part, and the whole country is expiating for their sins.
And that's it from Mr. Rusiripala and myself. I'll hand you back to Joel with the main news.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining with that very timely discussion. With that, moving on to more news. Now, Fitch Ratings has cast doubt over the government's ability to achieve ambitious targets determined through the 2019 budget.
The budget announced this week sets out plans to get fiscal consolidation back on track. The budget deficit for 2020 is at 3.5% of GDP, despite the deficit reaching 5.3% in 2018, compared with an original target of 4.8%. The target for 2019 is set at 4.4%, an upward revision to the earlier deficit targeted for 2019. Fitch Ratings says hitting these targets will be challenging, as it will require sharper deficit reduction over the next 2 years than we had expected, and would be more aggressive compared with the government's 2018 budget. Meanwhile, Moody's Investors Service said achieving the Sri Lanka government's deficit and debt targets set out in this week's budget for 2019 will be challenging without a big increase in fiscal policy effectiveness and faster economic growth.
Everybody knows in this country that we have had a very, very volatile political and economic situation. If we are not going to have political and economic stability in the country, whatever proposals that the budget has presented might not necessarily be implemented as expected.
Convening a media briefing in Colombo today, the National Chamber of Commerce made their comments regarding the budget proposals for 2019.
Maybe last maybe 1.5 months we have seen certain amount of appreciation after rupee getting depreciated by 20%. Now, we do not believe the currency is going to get appreciated towards the end of the year as well. I think maybe a couple of years back they have tried to kind of put on some kind of mechanism to appoint a committee to look at the disbursement as well as the expenditure, successfulness of the projects, each and every step of the project to be reported back to the Parliament. I am not very sure to what extent that committees they are functional. That committees, that kind of a committee, very proactive committee, is going to be important for the fulfillment of the expectation of the government as well.
Venerable Bhatramule Silaratnathero made a request from the Ministry of Finance for information of all loans between Sri Lanka and China under the Right to Information Act.
How much has our country obtained as loans from China? How much is the amount that needs to be settled? We think about how to save our country from the debt burden. This is why we have made this request from the Rights to Information Act. From 2015 to 2018, this government now says that $17 billion should be paid by 2023. So right now, we have requested these information to take court actions to restrain from paying them.
Still in local news, Minister Ravi Karunanayake made a statement in Parliament today about public enterprises.
Development in this country has halted. Either it has to be handed over to the politicians or it has to be handed over to the government officials. The national carrier Sri Lankan Airlines is operating without proper leadership and without a proper plan. A loss of 55 billion rupees was incurred this year. If proper investigations are not carried out into this incident, the taxpayers' money would be wasted. We can see that there is no plan. What is happening to Sri Lankan Airlines? During the Mahinda Rajapaksa administration, a brother-in-law was appointed to Sri Lankan Airlines and a close associate, Sajin Divas Gunawardena, was appointed to Mihin Lanka, while his brother was appointed to Sri Lankan Airlines. It resulted in the creation of yet another state enterprise that burdens the general public. When the new government was elected, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe appointed Suren Ratwatta, the brother of his associate Charita Ratwatta, to the post of CEO of Sri Lankan. According to Minister Ravi Karunanayake's statement, relatives and close friends are responsible for losses amounting to 55 billion rupees that was incurred by Sri Lankan Airlines this year. It must be noted the top posts of a number of SOEs, including the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, Litro Gas Company and Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, are held by the relatives of ministers. The statement made by Minister Ravi Karunanayake is an interesting one. But who is truly responsible for making Sri Lankan Airlines a loss-making enterprise? Does this not show that appointing relatives and close associates to high positions at state-owned enterprises has only led to an increase in the losses, further burdening the general public?
It's time for us to take a look at some views expressed on our Face the Nation program last evening.
The IMF has failed to realize this. The non-performing portfolio of the state banks will be in a very worse situation in 2 or 3 months' time. Do you know that by having to finance some of the state-owned enterprises which are deteriorating completely, the banks are running the risk of becoming undercapitalized? We are in very big danger. IMF has failed to see this. I am publicly saying this. And it's an impending danger that we are facing, the entire banking industry in this country. especially the state-owned banks, their non-performing portfolio increasing tremendously, signaling a danger.
Fuel prices have been increased with effect from midnight today.
The price of a 92-octane litre of petrol has been increased from 129 rupees to 132 rupees. The price of a 95-octane litre of petrol has been increased from 152 rupees to 159 rupees. The new price of a litre of auto diesel is 104 rupees, while super diesel has been increased to 134 rupees.
News from courts this evening. The quo warranto writ petition filed by Ranil Wickremesinghe and 121 MPs against former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and 48 others has been withdrawn by the petitioners today at the Court of Appeal.
The writ petition was filed seeking an order in the nature of quo warranto declaring Mahinda Rajapaksa and 48 others are not entitled to hold the office of Prime Minister and Cabinet. The petition was filed by 122 MPs from the United National Party, JVP, TNA and the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress. Following the consideration of the petition that was filed on the 23rd of November 2018, the Court of Appeal issued an interim order on the 3rd of December 2018 preventing Mahinda Rajapaksa and the group of MPs from holding the office of Prime Minister and Cabinet. The following day, Mahinda Rajapaksa and several other parliamentarians filed 4 petitions with the Supreme Court requesting that the interim order be lifted. However, on the 14th of December 2018, the request to lift the interim order was rejected by the Supreme Court. Mahinda Rajapaksa resigned from his position as Prime Minister following the Supreme Court's verdict. When the petition was taken before Court of Appeal Judge Arjun Obesekar this morning, counsel appearing for the petitioners noted, as the relief sought from the petition have been received, there was no need to continue with the petition. Therefore, Court permitted the petitioners to withdraw the petition.
The International Conference on Broadcast Piracy and Intellectual Property Rights got underway at the Stein Studio Complex in Ratmalana today.
The conference, organized by the Asia Broadcasting Union and hosted by the Capital Maharaja Organisation Limited and MTV Private Limited, saw the participation of international and local legal luminaries representing law firms, broadcasters and other key stakeholders. Today's conference followed yesterday's Intellectual Property and Legal Committee meeting, which saw the appointment of its new chairperson for the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union Intellectual Property and Legal Committee, Group Director of Legal and HR of the Capital Maharaja Organisation, Suranga Jayalath. The theme of today's conference was broadcast privacy and intellectual property rights in the era of convergence.
Well, with that, we wrap this edition of Primetime News. Thank you very much for stopping by. More follows on our website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. I'm Joel Outspoken.
And I'm Michaela Fernando. Good night.
Good night.